Create a brand. Words you hear all the time from the gurus, but what does brand even mean? Is it a catchy logo, a name, maybe just some colors? Well, that's exactly the question that we are here to answer. And today we'll explore what it means to build an unforgettable brand identity around your game. I'm joined by Katie and Jonathan Binns, a brother and sister powerhouse duo who live and breathe indie game marketing. Katie has over a decade of marketing experience and has worked on games like Warhammer 40k Mechanicus. Jonathan is a senior brand manager over at Super Rare Games, the publishing company that brings digital games to life with limited edition physical releases. On this episode, we're going to explore how you can create an authentic brand that resonates with players.
Players really do hone in on when games don't feel authentic, and that's a big part of what comes down to brand.
How to craft an entire ecosystem around your game.
Tone of voice, community narrative branding. It should really be this beautiful ecosphere of what the game is internally, shown externally. That's really what I think it is.
Common misconceptions about branding.
Branding really is that footprint really that your game leaves behind, or it's the footprint that your game has, as Jonty said, that is unique amongst the many games out there.
And together we'll analyze a real world game example.
I think it's a really rich, unique style of pixel art, and it is really reflective of that retro style.
But it also had that feeling of exploration that you almost want to explore and 100% it.
Grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, and let's build out that brand. Welcome to Freaking Cool Indies. So today we are going to be talking about building a strong brand identity for indie games. And again, focusing on things like target audience and finding your voice, being unique within your game, why it matters, and why it is something that every single indie should focus on. I think it is something that I personally feel is incredibly important, and I think whether successful indie games intended to or not, there is typically always something that is unique when it comes to their brand and how they can stand out into the crowd. So I guess maybe to start, let's lay the groundwork. And what do we mean when we're talking brand identity for a game? Is this like a catchy logo in a name, or is there more to that than just again what you see on a Steam page or on a Twitter profile?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a lot more than a logo and a color scheme. It sounds really cliched, but it's all about the emotional and the narrative sort of lineage that you want for your game and the experience you want your users to have when they get involved. It really allows the user, the player, to sort of get that emotional hype before even pressing start on the game. That's what's really fundamentally important, particularly in this day and age where there's so many games and there's so much choice for players. It's all about allowing the player to get that emotional connection and that want to be involved, even if it's just watching a streamer play it or you're sort of watching it vicariously through other people. It's all about just creating that identity that you want from it. And also, it's just to make the game recognizable and memorable again, because there are so many different avenues for you to get information and content into yourselves, be that through social media, be that through like YouTube Shorts, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. Um, you have basically 5 seconds to get someone's attention, which obviously isn't ideal. So it's all about making sure that in that crowded space, you're standing out as much as you can and staying true to yourself.
Gosh, I mean, there's not really much to add to that. But from my side, I always see gaming spaces as ecosystems. So, for example, a Discord is an ecosystem outside of the game, right? So it has, a completely thematic environment to the game. It has different elements that help players feel immersed outside of the game. So the branding really should be that. It should be an ecosystem, as Jonty said. So, tone of voice, community narrative branding. It should really be this beautiful, ecosphere of what the game is, internally, shown externally. That's really what I think it is. One game that I worked on, Mechanicus 40k, one of my favorites back in the day, my first game actually in 2019. I remember building an ecosystem of branding on social media, pretending to be a tech dominus, right? Which is a tech priest, and I was speaking in binary, and I said, your flesh is weak, I won't speak to you, so I very much created an ecosystem of branding external to the game. And that just helped players feel like the game was continuing, even if they'd left and 100%ed it. So I think branding definitely should be that extension of the game and that ecosystem external to the game as well that helps players feel fully immersed in it, you know. But John T covered it beautifully. Yeah.
And with your example there, what was some of the, like, how did the audience react to it? Were people also kind of messaging back, or let's say recommenting, or whatever it would be, kind of in a similar tone, or like what did that look like from the audience side of it?
They loved it. They jumped in. You know, they would share with me toaster memes, which was a running Mechanicus joke, and they would also speak to me in binary, and I'd have to use a binary translator most days when opening up, you know, Twitter as it was to translate. So a lot of fun. When they found out, I think the person who I was behind the Magos Dominus, when we did with Lord Mandalore, we had a great Discord Q&A about the game because it was launching onto consoles. They're like, "Oh, you're the Magos Dominus I've been communicating with in binary," and I was like, "Yes." And it was so nice to have that breath of fresh air and to be myself, but then to jump back in and be a Magos Dominus again. So the community were very receptive to it, and I think that's something that many games since then have done really, really well, and have really picked up on the need to have that branding externally to the game on socials and community.
Yeah.
But that's my area of expertise. I know John T is, more branding and product management. But yeah, definitely something that I love, to see games doing, and I love to continue doing that with the games that I'm working with.
Very cool. And from, like, okay, if I'm a developer, you know, I'm getting started, or maybe I have my game going, but like, how early should someone be starting to consider, you know, what is my brand, or what is the brand identity? Is there such thing as too early? Do they need to already have a foundation or a prototype, or is it before that, after that? What does it look like more from a timing perspective?
I don't think early is early enough. Ultimately, what you really need to do as a developer when you're making a game is you want to really know that area that you're going for within a genre. Genres are so huge, they're so crowded, there's so much going on, there's so much vibrancy that you obviously want to be able to stand out. It's not just as easy as knowing what your USP is, what your unique selling point is. It's also really understanding how you want to stand out in that space. Do you want it to be through your art style? Do you want it to be within the mechanics that you show? And that also sort of all plays into your brand identity as a whole. Like Katie said, it's that ecosystem that you exist within. So as soon as you're sort of going through those concept stages, that's when it's really worth considering. There's obviously, it's never too late to always pivot as well. There are some games that I've worked on that have gone through big sort of quite drastic mechanical changes later on in development life cycle. That doesn't mean that the branding is dead. It just means that you just have to change the direction you're going. It's a bit
Hmm.
like a big ship at the end of the day, and all you can do is just sail it for as long as possible
Yeah.
until it gets to its destination.
Yeah, no, I think I agree completely. I think the second that you decide on, Godot, Unity, whatever it is, that's when you should be capturing. And developers to me always say, "Oh, I'm working on something design-wise, I'm in Gravity Sketch or whatever. I don't need to capture this, do I?" And I'm there going, "Yes, please, we need content." So I think developers think that even if they're doing a sketch of a character for the first time that may or may not make it, capture it, because then you can tease it and say, "Did you know this character almost happened? Let's do a poll and see what you think of it." So it's also really
Hmm.
helpful if you need filler spaces. So for example, if you've launched and you have that beautiful wave, of wish lists and purchases, you then have that dip, right? And so it's filling that dip with something and having that content that you've captured, at the very beginning, brilliant. And so as Jonty said, the second that you decide to make a game and whichever platform you choose, and that second you pick up the pen or the mouse, that's when you
Yeah.
really should be thinking about marketing and about capturing. But ideally, from our side for an indie, 18 months is really a sweet spot, because at the moment we're seeing a lot of games go from, launching their Steam page to then to Kickstarter, and then you have the alpha, beta, demo, time frame. So 18 months, I'd say,
Yeah.
is a nice spot. If, as Jonty said, you pivot or you change direction in branding, etc., totally fine. It's really just about building those relationships early. As Jonty said, as soon as that game idea comes into your head, get onto Reddit, get into those spaces, and get sharing. That's the real key.
Yeah. Awesome. And I know throughout the episode, we're going to think, how to find your audience and how to test out some of those different voices and tones until you find one that resonates. So I'm
I
very,
jumped
very
ahead. I
excited
was
about
too
that.
eager.
Jonathan, from more of the publisher's perspective and kind of that side of it, how does a strong identity make a game more attractive, or maybe just easier to champion? Like if you go to your boss and say, "Hey, look, like they're already doing this or they're not doing that," does that truly make an impact when it comes to working with a publisher?
It is a great question, and unfortunately, it has a real big impact. Ultimately, what it comes down to is if you, as a developer, really know your game, and you really know the vision you have for your game, that passion seeps through into everything you do. When you're presenting your game, hopefully to a prospective publisher, or to an investor, whoever, whichever avenue you choose to go down, the passion that you show for your game through the brand identity and really understanding your game, that's going to be what sells it.
Hmm.
Obviously, as publishers, we'll look at like a myriad of different things when we look at signing games, but a lot of it comes down to the passion behind the project, the vision you have for it, and also just your sheer determination and drive. If you know the space that you want to target, why you want to target it, there is nothing that sells a game more really than that.
Cool.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. And Katie, do you have any kind of examples or maybe some common misconceptions that an indie developer might have about branding and what that actually means?
Oh, yes. So actually recently, on Reddit, there's an interaction with a developer who thought that branding meant they had to show themselves, right? That they had to be the face of the game, that they had to be front and center every day, on Twitch, on X, sharing stories. Not at all. What branding really is, it's that footprint really that your game leaves behind, or it's the footprint that your game has, as Jonty said, that is unique amongst the many games out there. So it's really about finding your niche. And one thing that we do at Navigating with current clients is, we kind of map out what your USP is, as Jonty said. So if you're a solo dev, you're based in Canada, and your game is a Metroidvania, brilliant. We then hone in on that circle, and we find out, okay, this is your USP, this is your brand. So rather than saying, oh gosh, it has to be just me, that's not it at all. It's really about finding that footprint and building that footprint and then using that as your brand. So yeah, you don't have to be front and center, live streaming every day. Definitely not. It does help if you could, have that nice personal touch, especially in indie space, more so than AAA. But definitely, it's more about, as I said, creating that footprint. Mm.
Definitely. So there is very much a difference between, let's call it, a game brand and then a personal brand, right? Like where those don't mix and intertwine, or that maybe they don't have to mix and intertwine. Although I'm sure if you can get both of those working synchronously, there is positive benefits. But again, I know even just in speaking to my own group of indie devs and this and that, like it's personal brand, I think is a lot, maybe a different story for a lot of them.
And there was a really great success story recently on Kickstarter by Alan Becker, who's made this great game called Animation Versus. I say made, is in development, and he has 30 million followers on YouTube, and I think it was it surpassed its backing, I believe, within 24 hours. So I think having a brand already built does help. So if, let's say, for example, we're speaking to two devs at the moment who are based in Croatia, if you have that platform already built in that that niche that you have, amazing, and that's really worked well for Alan. If you don't, as I said, totally fine, just build one. But as John said earlier, as soon as you can, and get that footprint shaped. But it's definitely not meaning, as you've said, the personal brand. It's very much more a nice amalgamation of the two.
What's also really tricky as well is it's not just about marketing. I know that brand like gets this weird, but it's not necessarily weird, but it gets this preconceived notion that it's all about the marketing avenue. It also really shapes the game as well. It's not just focused on how you sell it externally. You want to be able to sell it within the game as well. Players really do hone in on when games don't feel authentic, and that's a big part of what comes down to brand. So for a developer, as soon as you know exactly what that brand is, it will just seep in throughout everything you do. From like small mechanical decisions all the way to art style. It all sort of just comes into this really nice package at the end of the day that then you can pass on to the players.
Yeah. And is there any, let's call it, easy or beginner framework that you can think of that an indie dev might want to just like, okay, this is my one page marketing plan. This is my like point of truth for my brand where they can kind of fall back to it if they're ever feeling a little like, I don't know which way to go with this.
Oh, without spoiling it too much, I actually personally believe that you shouldn't try to be too unique in this space. A lot of players are oversaturated with games, which isn't a bad thing. It's great for us gamers. Um, but we always draw on games that we've played before. It tends to be genre definers within that space. So what I always say to developers is just think about what those genre definers are that you're sort of trying to mirror, those ones you're trying to pay homage to, but then say what you do differently. So if you're sort of like that slight maybe Doom clone, but you do combat a little differently, or maybe you've got Souls-like and combat going on, that kind of thing. Basically, just say, I am this meets this, but with a little bit of this. Because that not only helps you hone in on what it is that you want to be and why you want to be different within that space, but then when it comes to the player base and also to future investors, anyone like that, it just makes it so much easier to sell, particularly with press as well. They instantly go, I know the vision you're going for. I see it. You've hit it. You've nailed it. Done.
Mm. I think also when it comes to jumping onto that, sorry, when it comes to building the brand around release and after release, if you have those game examples as well that you're most like, you could then turn to them and say, hey, do you want to bundle together? Do you want to have some in-game competitions? Do you want to have, ways that we can collaborate in-game, after release that can help you perhaps at your anniversary? So I think as well as John, you said, having those touch points with other genres or potentially within your genre that are famous that will get publishers noticed. I think also having that really to help you out with regards to sales is huge. And that's things that devs are really picking up on now, which is great, but they're not using it fully to the extent that they could be. So I definitely think, as John T said, make sure that you have those names that you can compare your game to, but also make sure that you're reaching out to them. And if you're relating to them, brilliant. How do you use them in the nicest way to help boost your own title when it comes to releasing?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think you see it more from, let's call them like the big dogs of the indie games, your Dead Cells. I know they did like a big crossover with all the different kind of like big dog indie game titles, right? And then and you've seen that there's a couple other, Dave the Diver I think also does a really great
Yes.
job with connecting with other IPs and titles and doing that cross promotion. But I do agree with you, Katie. I think that's something that hasn't yet really taken off from the more smaller or mid-level indie devs, of finding people in a similar genre and like, hey, can we build something together within our games to cross promote and kind of, you know what I mean, bring an item or a character or something to kind of connect our worlds together. I think is a potentially really cool branding opportunity.
I definitely think that sometimes within the industry, people forget that we're in it for the love of the games. When you look at obviously the big upper echelon of the industry, you look at it and go, it's a big competition, obviously, because there's a finite amount of space that you can sell your game within. There's a finite amount of players at the end of the day. You want to be able to sell your game as much as possible. I think this is what makes the indie space really beautiful, is that we are all just people that want to make these really cool games. We want to make them because we want this specific niche within this specific genre. Like
Yeah.
I've been a player that's gone, you know what I really want to play? I want to find a game that's a bit like Hades, but it's got maybe like a little bit more of this interaction or that interaction. Oh, this game does exist. Cool. And then you'll go to that game and they'll be like, oh, and we've called out this game and this game and this game because we loved the journey that they went on, and we're gonna celebrate them even though technically they're our competition. There's no competition when it comes to the indie space. I think the more that developers realize that and they sort of support each other on their journeys, the more the indie space will flourish.
Yeah, I agree with that wholly, and I think that like personally speaking, I know that's why I love indie games so much, for exactly that. It's like the ultimate fusion recipes of everything you can possibly think of, And sometimes you're just like, how does this work? And then it's just like, but it does, and that's like the most beautiful part of it, is when you find those games.
100%.
So last question before we move on to like how do we find our target audience? But the question is more around, how fixed does our brand identity have to be? Is this something, like you were talking? Okay, started early on. Are we locked in at that? Is this something that we can evolve over time? If our game has launched, are we still locked in? Like what does it look like from more of a fixed or flexibility side of the equation?
Do you want to take this one, Katie, first, or do you want to jump in?
I was like, could you repeat the question? Sorry, my phone is overheating. So I just had to maneuver a little bit and calm it down. Sorry.
No problem whatsoever. So the question was, how fixed does a brand identity have to be? So we've already talked about, we want to do 12 or 18 months leading up to launch. From there, is it locked in at that point? Can we kind of jump back and forth or change it as we're going or as the game developed? Or do we want to try and start the same and keep it similar?
Well, from my side, I think it's very much a fluid thing. I think if it is fixed and the market does change, I think sadly, you may be in trouble. So I think definitely react to the market, and in whatever way you can then adapt to it, brilliant. One game that I worked on previously, Walkabout Mini Golf, it released originally, and it still is, a mini golf game in VR. But right now, it's very much more pivoting to be this E for everyone social space where you can play mini golf, right? So I feel like it's very much adapting to the VR chat, the rec rooms, the online spaces, and it's now become this beautiful ecosystem. I use that word a lot, where players can meet and use it more as a social space with the mini golf on the side. So they adapted very much to the trends on VR and it was shifting to. So I think very much so, even after release, you need to be aware of that. But also, as you said, in that 18-month time frame, your roadmap should very much not be fixed. Because if it is, as I said, and suddenly Balatro comes up, or there's a game that really takes it by storm, and suddenly, like the Animal Crossing revive, right? Everyone was suddenly jumping into the wholesome community builders. So I think you very much need to adapt. But, as John said earlier, if your game has that beautiful niche that is filling a need, like, a game about digging a hole, it fulfilled a great need that people had, brilliant, then definitely stick to it and own it. But if you feel that, perhaps you're targeting at the wrong time in the market, or you could adapt to meet a trend, brilliant. I would definitely highly suggest being as fluid as you can. Yeah.
Cool.
I
Very
also think when it comes to after launch, it's never too late to pivot. One of the great things about the indie space as well is the audiences are very receptive and they're also very giving of feedback. As a developer, you have the opportunity to then be able to, like, okay, we've launched. Launch hasn't been as successful as we wanted, which means maybe our brand identity isn't as pristine as we wanted. Okay, well, we've got these sort of 400 people that are super, super core supporters of us, and they're making all these changes. We can now go on maybe like a little bit more of a longer tail campaign where we basically just slowly change the game, make it so that it's something that the players want rather than this vision that we had at the beginning. Obviously, the vision will still be there, but you'll just be being shaped by the players, which is a great space to be in as well. So it's never too late. But yeah, never be afraid to also stick to your guns if it's something that you have like a real passion for and you think that the space is there.
cool. Very cool. Okay, so let's shift over to the next part of the conversation, and that is finding and understanding our target audience. So, first, let's dive into why is it more important to find an actual specific target audience as opposed to going after everyone? Hey, I'm making an indie game, I'm going to go after people who play video games. Why is that a disaster?
I think it comes down to, unfortunately, there was a really cool report done. I can't remember who did it. I want to say it was someone like Newzo or someone
Music.
that looked at Newzoo. Thank you very much. It was the report on the player retention at the end of 2024 or 2023. Um, and it basically said from all the data that they pulled, it was something like 8 or 9 games had 80% of player time.
Mm,
So then what you're doing is you're going, okay, so for this 20%, we basically have to fight for this space. The way to fight for it is to go and find the people rather than making a space for people to come into. Because ultimately, there is such little time for players to spend going to look for these new communities. They'd rather stick within their own ones, mainly because it's the communities they've grown up with. If you find a space that you love when you're growing up as a child, as a young teenager, say, for example, I found a love for city builders and for 4X games. That's the space I've stayed in ever since, and that's been sort of 12, 15 years of gaming. That's the space that I've loved. That's the space I will stay in probably until the day I die. So rather than trying to make a space for me to come and find, it's better for developers to go in, waders on, and go, hey guys, you guys are part of this community. I love this community for X, Y, and Z. This is why I'm going to stand within this community. This is why my game deserves to be in this space. And that's the better way to get involved rather than trying to make your own one.
very cool. And Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like also, let's say, okay, I'm putting my stake in the ground. Like, this is my space. I'm part of this community. The importance of also highlighting other games in that community, right? Shining light on other developers, and not just being there to talk through your own game, right? If you're truly part of the community, providing value to those who also love the different types of games would build a stronger brand.
100%, 100%. I know that gamers get a common trope put against them, which is we're all like league players. I mean, as a league player myself, I know what's associated with it. Um, but I think players and the community as a whole isn't as toxic as everyone worries that we are. particularly within the indie space, there's a lot of love for one another, and there's a lot of wholesomeness going around, and a lot of energy to want to support each other. Um, and I do think it is almost impossible for a developer to come in and not acknowledge any games that have existed beforehand, because fundamentally they're going to be driven by something which is a passion for that space, and there's going to be a game that got them into it, even if it's a game from sort of the early noughties, maybe even like the early tens. There's still going to be that game that you went, I played this game. This is the game that then pushed for my desire to then be a developer myself. This is why I want to support this space because I love this game. So for me, it was Age of Empires 2. I was an absolute lover of the Persians, and I went, you know what? This is a game that I love. This is why I want to get into gaming. I want to be able to support more games like this, so that when I'm also growing up, I get to play games like that. It's like it's just a very nice cycle of give and take.
Percent. And as if like if I was in your community and you referred me to a game that maybe I hadn't played before, I'm not gonna not play your game anymore because I found something different. In fact, it's like you have built more trust with me, which would make me want to come back to your community and come back and what else are you building? What else is going on? Because you've already led me to something great once before. And again, I think there is a lot of friction, or there can be a lot of friction with developers feeling like, I don't want to highlight other people because then they're not looking at what I'm building, and they're not going to wish list my stuff.
Yeah, completely agree. It's also a level of trust as well. If you're coming into a community and you're showing that you don't really know it, or at least you're not perceived to be knowing it, they're going to go, why would I be interested in what you have to offer if it sounds like you don't really get to understand the space that you're in? Like, obviously, being part of a community, it is a blessing for all gamers, like fundamentally. And if you come into a space and you don't acknowledge anything, you don't talk about your inspirations, your desires, your passions about why you love that space, players are going to look at it and go, "Can kind of see through you. There's no authenticity here. Just gonna quietly ignore you and just move on."
What are some like kind of practical ways that an indie dev can start researching and identifying who is their game really for?
Um, Great question. So I say this to all, devs that I've worked with is okay, who is your target player? Who is, or players, what are the target players that you can see sitting down, starting up your game, not necessarily 100%ing it, but, putting in some hours and really seeing your take, as John just said, on the genre. So that's what I would do, and then I work backwards. So let's say, for example, you're making a Metroidvania game with heavy metal, much like Valkyries, So you then go, okay, I'm looking for, let's say, a 40 to 60-year-old, big into heavy metal, but loves the Metroidvania scene. Where would I go? And I go, okay, I have three branches there. I have, the age category, I have the genre, and then I also have the type of music as well. So there already are three strands, which you can then look for online, and Reddit, for example, would be really big areas for that. There's a really great Metroidvania space on there. I would then go into those spaces and I would then get feedback, as John just said, from players and say, hey, I'm looking to make this game. Let's have a chat. Come see this latest build if they can within vertical slice, or even, here's my pitch. What would you think, to change here? So I think definitely if you can look at your target player, work backwards, connect those strands, find out where they are, and then really, really go from there and get them with their very honest opinions, to feedback in that early stage, which is also really great because it's even before you've picked up the mouse to design, So at that stage, you already have almost the blessing, from the Metroidvania community that yes, there is a need for this before you've invested any money or built a team. So yeah, work backwards from your ideal player or players, and definitely, get in those communities as early as you can and get that game approved if possible.
Very cool. And when both of you or either of you are working with clients, are you talking about things like user personas and kind of, okay, let's get granular, or let's pick kind of like one or two different people that you can then talk to, and like these are the people who you should be targeting?
So yes, we have. Well, I mean, they're sort of like they're not fake personas, but they're like sort of just generically named. So, for example, there would be like, this is Matt. He loves farming simulator games. These are sort of the games he's in. These are the spaces he's in. Obviously, this person exists in like that sort of community, not specifically named Matt, but it's more just allowing you to then sort of put that name to the sort of the fake face of what this community actually is. It then allows you to go find more, because then you'll go into this space going, okay, well, I know that Matt loved this space. Okay, now going to have a conversation with this person, and this person is pointing me to this community because it's sort of a part of it. And it sort of just takes you down a really nice rabbit hole of exploration. And then at the end of it, you come out of this rabbit hole and go, I've got this treasure trove of information. Like Katie said, it's highlighted a lot of pain points. It's highlighted a lot of things that people wanted to see in other games that weren't either implemented in time or were just never really sort of tackled. I'm going to take all of this information, distill it down into my game, fix everything, and then present it to these communities again and go, I think I've tackled all your problems. Let me know.
How would you go about, like, okay, so now I've done all my research, I've gone on Reddit, I kind of have an understanding of what it is. How would you go about moving from assuming to actually validating that, hey, this is going to connect with this group?
Play tests. Yeah, it's all about getting it into the hands of players. It is never too soon to get players involved. Um, there are really useful tools as well that unfortunately do have sometimes prices associated with them. But you've got companies like Go Testify where they basically have like a big back catalogue of players that you can go, hey, I've got this game. This is sort of roughly who I think I'm targeting. Can you please just use your tools? They'll go through and then they'll go, yeah, so we've worked out that this is sort of the audience that you were targeting. Actually, it's more towards this space. We've sort of had maybe 20 players that were sort of resonating more with that. We've found their player profiles because obviously they're all part of this big system. And they go, yeah, that's sort of along the lines of what we were targeting, but maybe if you just pivoted a little bit more that way. Or you can go through Reddit, which obviously leads to Discords as well. And in these Discords, there are people chomping at the bit to be able to play new games. So you just give them the game and say, hey, this is a Google form at the end of it. I'd love it if you could just play a couple of hours, fill out the form, and let me know. And then maybe I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks, maybe a month after I've done a little bit more development, and just keep that constant cycle going. What you then tend to see is you then tend to see communities forming around the developer, obviously within a larger community. But like Katie said, again, the buzzword is that ecosystem, isn't it? You've then got a developer going, maybe I'll create like a small Discord. And in that Discord, I'll run weekly, bi-weekly, monthly playtests where players can come in, feel like they're being involved within the development journey, which players love. And then as a developer, you're then going, okay, I'm getting all of this information, which is actionable. I can then really distill down and make sure that actually everything I've done was for a purpose, which is this finalized audience.
Going off what Jonty said as well, definitely explore your avenues. So if you're hearing this and you're a developer and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do that around, around development, don't worry. You could definitely look towards publishing if that's something you're interested in. They have great QA testers usually in house, and also when you have Jonty will know more. When you have sprints, with your manager, they can again help guide and confirm that this is very much of the genre. This is like our other releases. They'll really be that helping hand that you need. Also, something that I love doing, sorry to those that I have done it too, definitely go onto LinkedIn and find mentors. There are such big giants in the industry, from Atari, EA, reach out to them and say, hi, I'm making this game. I'd love some mentorship. You have experience in the industry. Can I be your mentee while I build this game, before our first playtest? And then as Jonty says, you have that great then playtesting window before you even get to the public beta where there's any update, where the Steam changes or you want to integrate a new trend, whatever it is, it has been play tested well. But definitely, as I said, first find out really which avenue you want to go down, be that play testing, self-publishing, and then, see if you can find a mentor to really help, get those unique quirks which may, get your game over the finish line more so than not.
Very cool. Yeah, and you would be for the game developers out there who are listening to this who might be a little shy about cold outreaching on LinkedIn, things like that. You would be shocked with how positive the reception can awfully be, and people who you might also think are untouchable, right? And again, it's not spamming their inbox and being like, hey, help me, but even just sending a quick message. Hey, I absolutely love what you guys are doing. This game is one of the big reasons I'm even making this genre a game, and again, I think it's pretty amazing how connected the world can be, and not how easy it is, but you can get in touch with people who you don't think that you can get in touch with.
I think to an earlier point as well, it's all about support. We all want this industry to thrive. We want this indie space to thrive. We want it to exist, frankly, for like the future generations. So we want these developers to come along and be like, "Hey, I've got this idea. I just need help." And we'll go, "Yeah, of course." Like even with Super Rare, even if you come and pitch to us and it's not a successful pitch, we're still going to help. Our CEO is really big on that, George. He's all about making sure that even if the game is unsuccessful with us, we can still help out. Be that we say come back maybe in a couple of months, and then we can really help hone in on the build. We can always help with the marketing strategies as well, so that when you go present to other publishers, the deck looks a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more rich with information. The industry wants everyone else to thrive. It's not like this dog eat dog sort of world. So yeah.
I think that was awesome. Again, from just to summarize, from when it comes to finding your audience, using things like Discord is really great. Reddit is a huge tool there, kind of narrowing down, okay, these are some of the core subgenres or genres of the game. And then from there, thinking both inside and I would also say outside of the box of, okay, where I can find these types of people to help validate this information, start getting known or helping out in these different communities where this player base lives. And then from there, potentially starting my own where I can, speak in my brand voice and do all those different things. Good summary?
Perfect summary.
Yes.
Perfect.
We could talk about it for hours, but that was a very nice, condensed summary.
Yeah, nice and condensed.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So let's jump into the next section where we are going to be talking about discovering your game's unique voice for that audience. And again, I know we've touched on a few things here, especially in the kind of intro part of the episode, if you will, but I do want to double click on a couple things and go a little bit deeper. So, Jonathan, I think you were the one who brought up unique selling points or your USP. So how can a developer continue to identify their game's USP? Like in more or less also through the specific lens of their target audience, and like kind of not thinking about just more of the what is it that I want, but maybe what is it that they want.
Yeah, I think again it comes down to highlighting the pain point and the reason why you're making the game. That should really feed into your USP. If it's, for example, you're doing a Metroidvania and you're going, I want to do a Metroidvania that sort of pays homage to these games, but the mechanics have to feel really crisp, that is your USP. That's something that you really need to focus on. You then can't ever forget about it because that's really the reason why you're making the game. So that always has to hone into everything you do within the game and then also without the game as well, with outside the game. And then that also then feeds into where you're finding your communities because you're then going to be looking for these people that have similar pain points of going, love Metroidvanias, but controls always feel clunky, or maybe you're going for like a visual art style and you're going, I love pixel art games, but there's never enough. And you go, cool, well, have I got the game for you kind of thing. So it's basically just making sure that your USP is fixing a pain point within that space in the genre.
Yeah, transitioning from all the acronyms today, transitioning from USP to UPP, which is unique player points. So one thing that I would suggest as well is, as I mentioned before, discover your game's unique voice is great, but really to do that is to find those player points that I mentioned, those strands, and to go, okay, really, what would they respond to? Have a look at other games they've interacted in. Go back through and say, okay, they love Monster Prom, for example. What do they do that really works well? Great, their tone of voice is this, and really build something that has that familiarity to it. Because again, if you're an indie, you need to have that familiarity really from the get go. Otherwise, they may go, oh, okay, this is new. And so I think really making sure that though your game voice, as John said, should be unique and have that footprint, I very much think you should use those player points and work out what could be familiar to them, but also something new, and to fill, as we mentioned, that gap that perhaps the genre could have. I think also, as I mentioned, reaching out to people within the genre who are those heavyweights who could go, yes, I think our voice worked really well here and there. And as I said, don't be afraid to create a character that lives on social media, have them take selfies for TikTok, have really fun things that make the brand feel alive and give it that uniqueness that it needs. And I think a lot of devs do feel nervous about being so, eccentric, perhaps creative. And I think that's what really makes it unique, though, is being that familiar at times, but also being that creative to the point that gamers go, you know what, if this is their voice, I want to dive right in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think also, especially for the devs that are maybe a little bit more reserved or not wanting to put themselves so front and forward, having the thought process be more in line in what you kind of just talked about of like, what would the character do, right? And it is that external persona, right? People always think about, putting, it's like the Batman syndrome of like, look, like it is not Mike, like I am putting myself into like, what would Batman do? And like, okay, now I have the ability, but being able to create your character, taking a selfie or doing things outside of maybe what you wouldn't do, but having your character be the one to kind of be that online persona.
I know it's also really daunting for people to put themselves out online, particularly within this space. I mean, personally, I'm a little bit more of like an introverted human being, so I completely understand that developer mentality. But one of the huge things that really defines the indie space is players want to support the developer as well as the game. They really care about the developer journey. They want to make sure that this developer does well so they can go on to make cool new things as well. It's not like your sort of again your big beasts at the top where you're sort of just like another name in a sort of like well oiled cog machine. People know that you're going to be either an indie dev or maybe you've got a small team behind you. They want to be able to support that journey. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an actual human being face. It's just that persona online, just to really help sort of, again, create that connection between you, the game, and the audience to make this really nice love triangle, basically.
Okay, so wrapping up, or kind of maybe one of the last things that I want to touch on in the unique voice aspect of it is the word unique. And uniqueness is, it's a very broad word there, but how unique does a game need to be? Is it okay to just, again, pick and choose a handful of really well-known mechanics or game styles and genres? Or do you actually have to take one of those and really elevate it to become something that no one's ever seen before?
Well, that's a bit of a loaded question. So there is nothing wrong with taking mechanics that exist already, particularly within specific genres. And there's nothing wrong with paying homage to games that already exist. Similar to what I was saying earlier, it is one of the easiest ways for you to really push onto players what your game is. It's the simplest way of marketing, basically. It's again making sure that the thing that you're doing that's different, your unique point to it, is something that the industry wants to see. Not the industry necessarily, but the community wants to see. It's going, okay, so by me making this game, this is what makes me unique because I'm fixing this problem within this space. Now, it doesn't have to be revolutionary. It doesn't have to be like what Fall Guys did back in the day, back when everyone was sort of just coming out of COVID. It doesn't have to do anything like that at all. You can do sort of what two games do really well and then just make it into your own thing. Doesn't have to be super special. Obviously, that doesn't mean then that if you've got something completely unique, that it's dead in the water. There's always a space within the industry for new games coming out. It's just more without sort of dampening dreams, just be cautious with the way that you want to develop it. Unfortunately, I've worked with some really talented developers that wanted to make unique games. And what we tend to see is the community either exists or it doesn't, and you can't really force those communities to come into that space that you're creating.
Gotcha.
So,
Like a cozy
yeah,
Souls like is something where it's like,
exactly.
on paper maybe a great idea, but
I
the
don't
the
know. I don't
combination might
know.
be too different from a community or genre
Yes.
standpoint.
Yeah, 100%. Because you're dealing basically with two communities that want different things. So obviously with Cozy, you want something that is maybe a little less mechanically heavy. You want to be able to just chill, relax with your friends, maybe even just date a few people on the game. Whereas I don't think the Souls people are really going to care about that. They want to be like, how fast can I dodge and how many hits can I take before I can kill the boss, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, it's basically just making sure that you are doing something within the space that is 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 what players want, and it's what you also want to bring into that space.
Cool. And Katie, do you have any tips from a communication standpoint of how to communicate your game's uniqueness, if you will?
Um, yeah, so first going back to what John T was saying about, building that uniqueness, but also having familiar aspects to it. One game that I loved recently was called Spilled. It's a cozy game. It's, you may have heard of it. About this fantastic cozy game on a boat. The solo dev behind it actually lives on a boat. So she used her lived in experience and her passion to really highlight, pollution in rivers, etc. So I feel she found her niche through that and found her uniqueness through that. So I feel like, again, as I said earlier, when we were chatting in between takes there, if you have a passion or a talent, if you play a musical instrument, or if you love to metal detect, there's a great metal detector game, an indie game coming out in the UK, for example. So I think if you have a passion that is a niche and you have that knowledge already, brilliant, build on it. And if, as Jonty said, if it manages to, fit into that beautiful gap and you can relate it to other games, more as an homage, amazing. But I definitely think use your passions, because then also it doesn't feel like work, which is the amazing thing. You wake up and you go, right, I'm going to go metal detect. I'll then use some of these findings to design the next level. So I think use your passion if you can, but also, yeah, definitely, as I just said, pay homage to the larger games to get that exposure, but also to get that fan base in straight away who know what those games are known for. Yes, but from a marketing standpoint, honestly, I think be as unique as you can be, but be as thematic as you can be. So one of my favorite memories of my career was working on a fantasy city builder back at Calypso Media in Germany, their subsidiary Casino Games, which is their indie branch. There was a fantasy city builder, and I was managing their Discord at the time. And they have, cows in game that you can interact with. And I thought, what, why don't we have some cow jousting? Let's get some cow jousting going. So we had, cow jousting tournaments. People could purchase. We made a market. People could purchase flags, popcorn, really get involved. And we had tournaments, and the winner, got access to the game early in a test. So I feel you need to be picking up on the themes in your game and the uniqueness of your game and translate that into marketing. One thing that we did with Walkabout Mini Golf, we had a DLC with Meow Wolf, which may be popular in the US. I think you may know of it, Mike, the Meow Wolf experiences. We worked with the one in Denver, and we created Numina digitally. So through marketing, we had these portals, and you could click through, and it would take you from X. You'd end up on Reddit, but you'd have this link to download that would have a file that was turn your cursor into something, So I think very much mimic the game in its themes through marketing, but be as unique as you can, because again, that's what really worked well for Coral Island, Monster Prom, the big indies. They had that uniqueness through marketing and didn't shy away from doing that. Yeah.
That's awesome. And also, I have never thought about metal detecting as a great game mechanic, but that is
right?
An awesome idea. Like that, it just like the more I'm thinking about it, it's like, yeah, it works on so many levels of that's very, very cool. And again, great analogy there. Okay, so next I want to actually take a little bit of time and for us to look at a real world example. So the game that I kind of proposed and brought to both of you, it's called Lucid. It is one that I personally am very excited about. I think from a mechanic standpoint, it takes familiar things, but then also creates its own uniqueness, and we can kind of dive through it here a little bit. So this is the Steam page here. It's called Lucid. It is made by Mac Black Studio and a fantastic developer named Eric. But the main kind of uniqueness slash combination that I think a lot of people can see right away is he is calling it the first ever Celesteoidvania. So taking Metroidvania, which is a very popular genre, everyone knows it, I'm going to say everyone loves it because Metroidvanias are actually my favorite genre. But he is bringing in mechanics from Celeste, which is something that you see, but you don't see all the time. So going back to just our general conversation, based on kind of like the description, the visuals, what you both are seeing on your page, like who do you immediately feel that this would be the core target audience for? And how would you say that Eric would go and kind of validate that assumption?
For me, looking at this, I think instantly that it's almost like a fusion of what looks like really intricate platforming and emotional storytelling. I mean, obviously, when you think of Celeste, I think of sort of like the things I was experiencing at the same time. So it was when I found a love for not Chef, Princess Mononoke. So it's like it's that emotional storytelling, that sort of like melancholy vibe to it. There are a lot of audiences that exist on Reddit that love that kind of thing, particularly within the gaming space as well. So that I think is instantly what I'm drawn to, and you can kind of see it in the art style as well. Um, yeah, it's got like that crystal vibe to it. That's I think it's a really rich, unique style of pixel art, and it is really reflective of that sort of that retro style, those sort of roots. But also, it looks like it brings like a modern indie vibrance as well. So it looks really rich.
Yeah, from my side, there's a really old game. Gosh, I don't know when it was released now, 10, 20 years ago maybe, called Hyper Light Drifter. And it was a beautiful, yeah, I'll show my age. It was a beautiful game that had, such as John said, great rich storytelling, but it also had that feeling of exploration that you almost want to explore and 100% it because you're wary you may miss something, you may miss a shard or something to unlock a secret compartment. So I feel that this is one of those games that has such potential to being one of those games that you want to 100%, that you want to explore every nook and cranny of. So I really got that Hyperlight Drifter vibe for that reason. I also think, as Jonty said, yeah, the Mononoke, the Japanese storytelling here is really showing itself. But I really got, the classic Metroidvania, 8-bit style vibe for me. Mm-hmm.
I wholeheartedly agree with all of those points there. It's like when you watch this gameplay trailer, you're just like, again, not only can I can't wait to explore this world, but I also I want to see that percentage counter go up and up and up and up, and just kind of collect everything that I can with its really really tight platforming. So yeah, super excited there. Jonathan, if this game kind of came across your desk or was pitched over at Super Rare Games, like what aspect from the brand would you be kind of like looking really closely at?
For me, it would be, ooh, it would be the mechanics, I think. I think for me, it would be how it feels mechanically to play. With these games, particularly with like the speed running space as well, it has to have really tight controls. So I know that it doesn't necessarily play into like the overarching image of the game, but it still plays into the brand because you want players to associate Lucid with, tight controls, feels really smooth to play, really receptive. It's one of the things that really does sort of define the space. At DQ, where I worked at before Super Rare, we worked on a really beautiful game called Evergate. And unfortunately, one of the big things that we were unable to fix before launch was how the controllers felt in the player's hands. And it did then affect how people perceived the game. So for me, it would just be making sure that those controls feel really tight, because as soon as you've got that nailed, the brand then just sort of all comes around it, and feels like a really nice homogenous ball.
I'm with you. And Katie, what kind of initially marketing angles or hooks might you recommend to Eric if you were kind of helping him or consulting him on this game of how he can communicate it?
I mean, there are so many angles to this, and different avenues to explore. So from the store page, and John T, I'm sure he knows more about this than me, and he'll may go into this. But from a store page perspective, you should be updating the key art ideally with every biome, monthly. That should be on rotation, so it looks like a new game. But also, players get to get that exploratory feel through the store page before they've even stepped into the game. I would also, around that key art change, have that whole month then being around that particular area. It could be around a character, it could be around a new skill. Make sure that you constantly have a new marketing beat that keeps players exploring, because when they step into the game, everything is familiar. That keeps them in the game, and also the exploratory element, carries through. One thing I would love to see as well, like I mentioned with Mighty Coconut, and the Meow Wolf angle, is maybe use the shards, right? So you have shards scattered across Reddit, which, as I said, has really great Metroidvania spaces. Hide shards if players pick them up, get as a talking point. Maybe they find things that they can access about the game early. Make sure that he's really profiting off that, that Kickstarter boost, which was fantastic to see, and that he really does, make sure that he's using that thematic element to really continue that exploratory theme through social media. And I would highly recommend, as I said, that shard element, get players hunting for shards, but also having that exploratory feel through the store page and through those key art and social media theme changes.
Yeah. And I love on the store page, he just has it so front and center of like, this is the inspiration of this game, right? And we've talked about inspiration and not really shying away from it. We've talked about it quite a bit, but I do think as someone scrolling down and you see these, 6 or 8 games or whatever it is, you're just kind of like, yes, I like all of this. This is a good bucket for me.
But also, again, to your point earlier, Mike, if you're a newcomer to this space, you want to go, oh, I found this game. And then you scroll down, you see this, and you go, oh, I'm going to go explore these games. Because obviously, this one isn't out yet. So I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to take my moment. I'm going to go look over here. And then you look over there, you go, oh, I love this game. I really enjoyed this aspect of this game. I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back to Lucid and go, wish list done. Because you obviously know what you're talking about. You really understand the space. And there's obviously a deep passion for this industry behind it.
Yeah, and with his inspiration, I think one other thing to point out is he actually also highlights what what exact element of each of these games is he kind of going for, right? Because I think if you were to just show Super Metroid or Zelda, there's each game has a ton of different mechanics. So I, as a player, might think, oh, if it's Zelda, maybe it's a top-down open world, whatever a different mechanic might be, and then in reality you are let down because, like, oh, from my player perspective, it's one thing, but I think because he's actually showing what element from each of the one also really goes to kind of help define and help really make clear to his the people on the page, like, this is who it's for if you enjoy these elements of these different games.
I definitely think as well, don't be shy to invite the devs of those games in. You can have a play test, for example, some of the original devs from Doom, and you can ask them, say, right, I picked some elements as inspiration from your game. Can you work out what they are and have a great play test or, a Twitch live stream? I think definitely use them if you can, so they can also see the inspiration, but also it gets their audiences in. And that works really well, for example, on Discord, where you can have Discord raids, right? So if you go to the Doom Discord and you say, hey, we have these beautiful traits, you can set up collaboration, you can have, Discord raids between each server. Brilliant. I think definitely don't just stop, as you said before, at saying these are the games that they're most like. As John just said, really make sure that you're you're collaborating with them in the best way possible. And also, make sure that you're really paying homage in the right way through the store page, as he is doing there. Yeah.
And kind of final question on this section here, but do either of you see any potential, like, pitfalls or challenges that Lucid might face when trying to establish a brand, because he's going with, a Celesteoidvania, if you will, as his main pitch?
For me, again, like I said earlier, it would be controls. I think that is one thing that this space basically it kind of lives or dies on, is how it feels in the player's hands. So my advice would just be get into players' hands as soon as possible, and then making sure that you're staying true to the art style that you want to present. It looks from the screenshots and from the trailer and from all the assets that I've seen of this game that he really understands the vibe that he wanted to go for and the vibe he wanted to portray. So that's a really good sign. But yeah, I think for me it would be the controls. That'll be it.
Yeah, I think from my side, if he is saying, it's a Celesteoidvania, the first of its kind, brilliant. Make sure that you're tying that in then through when you publish with something. Perhaps it could be, Celeste's anniversary. Maybe it could be something that they're doing. Maybe they're doing a patch or a major update. Make sure that if you are paying homage to them in this way, that they are also, collaborating with you to support potentially any future things that they may be doing on the game itself. Maybe an OST release, so you could collab there. So I think definitely find avenues outside of the game that, again, as we've said already, the games that you're paying homage to, make sure that also, around release, you're timing it right, you're making sure that it really fits in potentially with their roadmap as well. Just be considerate of that.
All right, so final section, bringing it all together. So the brand, the audience, marketing, we've kind of talked through all of these different areas of what an indie dev should be looking at, considering, kind of spending some time to hone down. But now that we have kind of like, okay, I know who the brand, or I know what my brand is, or at least maybe an initial idea, because like we were saying, this is something that's going to evolve the more that you do and the more people that you speak with. But I have my brand, I have my audience, I know what my unique factor is. How does that impact what decisions you make of what marketing channel you're going to focus on? So this is, okay, am I going to focus my time on TikTok? Am I going to focus my time on a YouTube devlog? Is it going to be on Reddit or Twitter? How would you kind of navigate that world?
For me, it would be know your audience, obviously. At this point, you'd know exactly who you're going to target. And I would just focus on what, obviously, they're not they're not competitors, but look at what the competitor analysis is showing you. So if you've got some really good case studies of games in that genre that have done specific things, there's no harm at all in just mirroring them to a certain extent. If you start going down that road, see what's sticking in specific platforms, and then you can basically just use that. The beauty and the annoying thing about marketing is it's a constantly evolving space. We're obviously seeing the rise and fall of certain platforms, which means that there's always opportunities for virality to happen, be that on TikTok, be that on X or Blue Sky, be that through YouTube as well. So find something that you've seen works, try that. If it doesn't work, that's fine. It didn't work. There's always a potential that it comes back, but never be afraid to try something new, but also see just see what the competitors are doing. That would be my hot take.
Ooh, I also have a hot take that may be controversial, so yeah, hold on to your seats. But I don't think social media is the only thing they should be focusing on. I think that you should also be really looking at other, as I mentioned, in-game opportunities. So, for example, if you're making a VR game, you shouldn't personally be on X. You should be collaborating with the creators of Rec Rooms, the people who are making the really cool VR spaces, and then say to them, hey, could we be digitally advertised in your space? For launch week, and that will probably get you more eyes if you're looking for that audience. Obviously, if you're in Rec Room, will get you more eyes than an X ad. No offense to X. So I think personally, you really need to think about social media obviously being such a great foundation, but I think definitely launching off that and going, okay, we're a mobile game, we really should actually be in this particular mobile game when they have an update and have an ad, for example, in the corner. So make sure that you're using your budgeting wisely, which for an indie is super important. And if you can get, free collaborations, for example, at Walkabout Mini Golf, we worked with this great game called Synth Riders. We did a remix of one of our tracks for the course Shangri-La, and that was in their game as a map. Great exposure for both. They're now working, with us on future projects, with them on future projects. So I definitely think, find affordable avenues and collaborate with games. Don't be afraid to collaborate with them and say, hey, we want to advertise for our week of release. And that's both, for both of you, that's really great. So I think social media is a great foundation. And as John T said, definitely find where your players are and go to those spaces first, because again, they'll tell you whether the game will work or not. But also from that, go into those games and see if you can find avenues. Okay, let's do a shield design competition in Valheim, or let's do XYZ. Really make sure that you're reaching those players in the games themselves too.
I also do think, just piggybacking off it again, uh, your launch plan, the roadmap that you're going to make for as a developer, it has to reflect the voice that you have in game. So if your game is loud and chaotic, be loud and chaotic in your marketing. If your game is more quiet, poetic, be softer in your social presence. Be softer when you're doing things like advertising and that kind of stuff. Your social media presence, even though obviously Katie has a real faux pas about it. Basically, experiment. Never be afraid to experiment with things. But once you've found that voice, make sure that you stick to it. It all comes back again to your brand. Um, and yeah, the ones that resonate best with players are the ones that really mirror the experience in game to the experience out of game.
Love it. And just as we're starting to look to wrap up here, what is one simple action that a developer could do this week to just start thinking more strategically about their game's brand or their game's audience?
Easiest one, play more games. I know that it sounds pretty basic, but you can never play enough games in the space that you want to make games in. You will always find inspiration in the smallest details. And frankly, what you'll do is you'll also find a lot of pain points that you have in games. It's one of the things that I always tell to our newly signed devs is spend 2, 3 weeks just going through playing a list of games that are similar competitors. Find what you loved about them, find what you would want to mimic, and then find what you really didn't like about them. Use that information to then go, okay, so we're going to pivot slightly and we're going to do this because I really hated this. So yeah, that would be my thing to do.
I love that. Oh, darn it, you took mine. I think from my side, it would be to listen both socially and through community spaces. So, as John just said, go into those store pages for a game, for example, it's really popular in a genre, and go to the forums, see what players are saying, see, what they're making in workshops. If they've got some great screenshots of areas that they love, okay, what can you take from that? So I think do that from a store page side and really dig deep into the community, but also listen socially. For example, if you have a hashtag for your game, go explore it. See what players are talking about if you released a demo. Don't be shy to really see the constructive criticism alongside the positive criticism you're expecting to receive, and make sure that you're really doing that listening alongside playing other games, as John just said, to really build that map as to what your game should look like. Yeah.
And lastly, if you guys could give one piece of advice to an indie dev who is struggling to make their game stand out, what would it be? And yes, I am very well aware that is a loaded ass question.
Lots of those.
For me, it would be ask for help. Solo dev is one of the scariest parts of the whole scene, because you do feel like you're in it by yourself, but you're not alone. Be that the community that might already exist, be that in spaces that you're wanting to penetrate into. Also, if it's just reaching out to developers that you've loved and the stuff that you've loved seeing other developers do, just reach out and ask for help. At the end of the day, it's no harm, no foul if the comeback is really sorry I can't help. but you never know until you ask. And it could just help open a door, or just really shine some light on what you could do as a next step.
Yeah, again, off of that, I think, make sure that you're really reaching out to the mentors, to those spaces where you could find people who've been through it. Because again, if you're reaching out to fellow solo devs, that's great. But if you can reach out to somebody who's done it successfully and done it well, and they've been through that whole process, you can really see the light at the end of the tunnel. Whereas if you're with solo devs at the same stage, that may be tricky to really get that feeling and that trajectory, what it could look like at the finish line. So as I said, mentorship, I think, would be so crucial if you can. And also, as Jonty said, don't be afraid to join us. We have Discord, subreddits, indie devs. There are spaces where so many of us do live and breathe and occasionally vent. I'm sure there are many devs who do. So make sure that, again, you have that space to vent, outside of your community. Some devs, they take it perhaps to their Discords and, they say, here's how my day's been. Instead, I would highly suggest, as Jonty said, connect with the devs themselves and go to those spaces and say, hey, I'm having a really tough time with this line of code. Who could help me? And you'll be surprised at how many go, yeah, let's get the kettle on if they're British and let's go. So I think, definitely don't be afraid to seek mentorship and to seek those community spaces with those going through it with you at the same time, as Jonty said. Yeah.
Well, one thing that I like to do with all of my guests over at Freaking Cool Indies is to pay it forward. And again, I think it is something, and we've talked about actually quite often in this episode, is making sure that we are continuing to highlight the amazing indie devs out there. So question for both of you, is there a game or an indie dev or a studio or someone that you want to just kind of shout from the rooftops and highlight that you think it deserves to be highlighted?
I mean, jumping straight in, it's a company, a dev studio that I worked with on a game back at my previous company called Masshive, who made Potion Permit. It's the game that I was fortunate enough to work on as a product manager. The team there are some of the sweetest, most genuine Indonesian people I've ever met in my life. They are super dedicated to our audience, and it's all about just making sure that they feel inclusive and included. And it's a stunning game, and the team are just absolutely credible human beings. So that's my shout out.
I mean, we talked before, Mike, about Valparis and how amazing it is. So I know I've added to your list of games to play. But I think from my side, it would be Mechanicus 40K, the first game I worked on. The soundtrack, if you've never heard organ chants, you just need to go listen to it. Please go listen to it. You'll thank us later, I'm sure. But they're releasing Mechanicus 2 with Bulwark Studios, which is a great studio. So I would highly recommend checking out the first Mechanicus 40K, diving in. Please wear headphones. It's an experience you'll never forget. And definitely checking that out. That's definitely my game that I'd recommend.
That's wicked. And lastly, where can people find you? If someone wants to reach out to either of you, both of you, get involved in helping with their indie game, what would be the best way for someone to get in touch with you both?
For me, I do exist on LinkedIn, but it's not my cup of tea, so I'd rather not go through LinkedIn if possible. So, I mean, I exist on Discord. My username, I'm going to imagine like it comes up on the screen like they do in the movies. So it'd be Jonty, so JONTY_BINNS. Always ping me a friend request and I'm happy to chat. Otherwise, it's email. So that's jonathanjbins@gmail.com. I'm happy to help with whatever you guys want to talk about.
Yeah, I'll follow suit then, without the surname. But I'm on Discord at Katie, Kati, 3 and then B. Or my email is hello@navigame.co.uk, or I'm on LinkedIn at Katie Bins. So please feel free to drop me a friend request. But if you reach Jonty, you can reach me too. So don't feel afraid to reach out to one of us. Individually, you can definitely reach out to both of us through each other. But
Well, with that, it is official, my friends. You both are freaking cool indies. Congratulations! It is a monumentous occasion. One to really write home about. Dear diary, it finally happened. No, I take. But again, I just wanted to say thank you very much to both of you for jumping on, hanging out with me for a little bit, helping our audience grow a little bit more and create the amazing brands that they want to just truly get their games out there and seen, and build that community that helps them get to their final goal as an indie developer. So once again, thank you both. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure that the audience does as well.
Really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mike.
Great, thank you.
Anytime. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Have a wonderful night. And to all of our listeners out there, you guys are freaking cool indies as well, and I will talk to you soon. Bye now.